Alright, so two big albums are turning 21 and 22 next month. King of All Kings, my favorite from Hate Eternal, and Jane Doe, Converge. With that, I was reminded of some pretty embarrassing shit involving both bands, including the time I met Trey Azagthoth from Hate Eternal. Yes, I know, but just listen to the story first. Which took place when I was young, so I look back in laughter now. First story with Trey. February of 2000, New England Metal and Hardcore Fest, and Hate Eternal plays the second stage. 2 years before that, however, I'm on a plane to Michigan to visit family, and I'm reading an interview in TERRORIZER with Trey, and he's talking about how, like, one of the things, or people I should say, that really helps him get stuff done in his life in a major way is that dude Tony Robbins. And I'm like, shit, that guy's helped me too. Quick background if you don't know who Tony Robbins is. He's like the original life strategist who's not a motivational speaker, but rather quite literally a fucking strategist, you could say. If you've ever seen that movie Shallow Hal, he plays himself in it, so there you go. So I was thinking, like, hell, I listened to that guy sophomore year to help me get my grades up, and it worked. And a quick related side note. In the event you too may be someone who thinks you could possibly benefit from somebody like Robbins but would prefer to hear it from a metalhead, CJ ORTIZ, the Metal Motivator's got you covered. Metal Motivator on Instagram. He's the fucking man. Alright, so back to the story. At some point between that flight and Metal Fest, I read that Trey had this side band called Hate Eternal. I know. I didn't own any of their albums at the time, but I was looking forward to checking them out on the second stage. I do, and no surprise, they were fucking awesome. Totally blasting the whole time and just slaughtering the audience. And Trey had this fan thing right in front of his monitor blowing up at him, so his hair was like all over the place, and he just looked cool as hell. So I'm up front, right? Me, this young dork, and at one point he looks over, and for whatever reason, even amidst all the chaos, I still thought it was an okay time to try and tell him that, like him, like I read by his own testimony in that issue of Terrorizer, that I too was a student of Tony Robbins. Yes, even while they were playing. So he looks over and I'm like, Trey, Tony Robbins, yeah, I listen to him too. Fuck yeah. Right? Naturally, obviously, I get no response, and like, why the hell would I? Like, what is he gonna just stop right in the middle of Catacombs and be like, cool? Same shit happens maybe one or two more times during their set, and like, what a fucking idiot I must have looked like, you know? So okay, their set ends and that's that. A few minutes later, the guys are standing around, so I go up to Trey, and very important to note, the first word out of my mouth wasn't his name. Like, I didn't formally address him, I just said, hey man, instead. Totally disrespectful looking back. But like a totally awkward dork, I'm like, hey man, great set. Just wanted to say that I'm also a big Tony Robbins guy. And he just kind of looks at me politely and he goes, Now, while most other people, normal people, might have expected a different sort of response, given that Robbins was still kind of cult back then, I, being the weirdo I was at the time, walked away feeling totally accomplished, all starstruck, like, yes, I just told Trey Azagthoth we got something in common. Because right after he did that thing, my last words were just, okay, kind of like, good day, sir. But the problem, and the reason he actually seemed to have no fucking idea as to what I was talking about, was because that wasn't Trey. It was ERIK RUTAN. Trey wasn't even in Hate Eternal, and he never has been. Yeah, I had somehow confused who was who and what band, and I knew RUTAN was also in Morbid Angel around that time, but I didn't know his face, or Trey's face, really, for that matter, so I'd messed up the fact that it was actually ERIK RUTAN who started Hate Eternal and not Trey. Regardless, though, for as menacing as he looks, he was honestly really cool. But how embarrassing though, you know? What a jackass. Alright, next bout of embarrassment. I'm in high school, like 16 at the time, and I'm working at the Men's Warehouse in Nashua, New Hampshire. For anybody not in the States, Men's Warehouse is a retail clothing chain that sells suits and like formal wear and stuff. So one day, one of the older dudes I worked with was like, you know, one of the managers of the Norwood location's in a band and they've been overseas a few times. And I'm like, whoa, you know the name of them or who the dude is? And he's like, nah, forget the guy's name and the band, but it's that loud shit you listen to. So admittedly, I was pretty curious, but I didn't put a ton of faith in it in case he came back with their identity and they turned out to be somebody that I thought sucked or something, so I just kind of left it at that. However, a few days later, he comes back to me and he says, oh yeah, I found out what that band's called. Converge. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Are you kidding me? Now, I loved Converge, and hardcore was my entire life back then. It was the only thing I cared about. So the fact that I was just told I worked for the same employer in the same region as somebody in one of my favorite bands was like fucking surreal. So I'm like, Jerry, who in Converge manages one of the Massachusetts stores? And he's like, I don't remember the guy's name. And I'm like, do you know what instrument he plays? And he's like, drums, he's the drummer, I know that much. So I'm thinking like, okay, drums, it can't be the new guy, because he said they've been out of the US a few times, and since Ben's joined, that hasn't happened yet. Damon, it's gotta be Damon Bellorado. Now, by that point, Damon was no longer in Converge, but I didn't care, because he was still a hero to me, and he was also in Bane, who I wasn't as big of a fan of as I was Converge, but ultimately that was still huge news to me. Because if you remember, and perhaps for anybody that might be watching under the age of 40, even back then in 2000, musicians were nowhere nearly as accessible as they are now. So to me, like, in terms of superstardom, Damon was no lower on the ladder than friggin' Paul McCartney. And in fact, the truth is that I honestly would have been way more psyched to have a connection with anybody in Converge than the Beatles, so I'm like, alright, I know what I gotta do. I go to one of the computers and I pull up the employee directory with everybody's company email, and sure enough, I see Damon.Bellorado at menswarehouse.com, and I'm like, I'm gonna email him. Damon, my name's Joe and I work at the Nashua store. I just want to say, like, Converge rules and you're the man. And then I sign off with like back then the word hardcore was often abbreviated and stylized with a lowercase h, an uppercase X, and then a lowercase c. So I'm like, HXC, Hardcore Pride, Joe. I must have checked for a response like 30 times that day. Next morning, nothing. I send another email. Damon, which band did you have a better time playing in? Converge or Bane? Stay true, Hardcore Pride, Joe. I check for a response like 2 minutes later and nothing. I check again a little while after that and nothing. 50 or 100 more times that day and the inbox is still empty. Next day I come back in, no response, but whatever, I'm gonna send another email. Hey Damon, it's me, Joe. Damon, did you guys ever feel weird about playing with some of those more emo bands like PIEBALD and stuff? I'm not saying they suck, but imagine if you guys played with PIECEMEAL or DISEMBODIED. That would rule. Never any response. Another email. Hey Damon, I know Jake doesn't drink or do any drugs, but he doesn't call himself straight edge. Do you? Thanks, Damon. Forever, Hardcore Pride. So I don't want to even think about how many more emails I sent over the next couple weeks, like never getting a single response, but I kept at it. And it was no secret in the store that I was psycho fanning out over the fact that this guy worked there too, so one day, another one of the dudes that worked at my location comes up to me and he's like, hey, you know how we all gotta be here next weekend to do inventory? Well, they're bringing in some of the employees from the other stores to help. And guess who one of them is? Damon Bellorado from Converge. And I'm like, oh fuck, I'm gonna get to meet him. That weekend rolls around, we all had to be there at 6 a.m. I got in bright and early at 5:30. Everybody starts showing up, and at one point, enter none other than the Mr. Damon Bellorado. It was actually him. I couldn't believe it, man. I was floored. There, not wearing a cave-in shirt or camo shorts or anything even remotely hardcore looking, but rather just like some kind of whatever clothes, was the man. And had he ever heard of me? Had he read a single one of my emails? Nope. The guy had no idea who I was other than just being some fucking dork that worked at the same company. But he was cool though. He was totally cool and thankful for my fandom and admiration and all that. We talked about his time in Converge and he told me that they got paid really well when they went over to Japan and he bought a Camaro with the money when they got back, and yeah, it was an awesome time, man. I could never figure out why he ended up working at Men's Warehouse, but in reality that was probably a more lucrative gig than Converge at the time, so sweet fucking rain, nice. Hopefully the mic picks it up and it's really goddamn loud and it fucks the whole video up. Fuck me up the goddamn fucking ass. But oh yeah, about the emails. When I told him I'd send him a couple, he was like, oh yeah, I never look at that shit. God bless him, man. Damon Bellorado. I hope he's doing well today. Fucking A. And then finally, this last story doesn't have to do with either band, but actually another one, and it's arguably not even really embarrassing per se, but December of 2015, I'm on a date with this chick and we go to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra at the Fleet Center in Boston, or TD Bank North Garden as it's called now. We go and the show's incredible, have a great time, and that's that. Show ends and we walk across the street to this really nice restaurant for dinner, and at one point while we're waiting for a table, a couple of these drunk dudes come up to us, like the kind that looked like they worked in the financial district or something, and they're like, man, you guys were awesome tonight. Seriously, you guys were amazing. And one of his friends was like, yeah man, killer show. And I'm thinking like, wait a sec, do they think? No. So I quickly go down the list in my head and I'm like, alright, well I got long hair, I'm dressed kind of rocker grade nicely because it's a date and the chick I'm with's got big blonde hair and she's all done up. And then I'm like, holy shit, do they think I'm in Trans Siberian Orchestra? So I just fucking went with it, man. I pretended to act like how I thought an actual rock star would in a situation like that. And I'm like, yes, thank you, thanks, glad you enjoyed the show, yes. I don't know, man, I was psyched. Like, you know, I was psyched that somebody would mistake me for a professional. So honestly, that was probably one of my top most psyched up times in life ever. Like, I bet I'll remember that one on my deathbed someday. Ah, what an asshole I am. So okay, dudes, there you go. Tales of a younger spew making a total ass of himself. And if you want to hear a similar tale on my brush with Merle Allen from Murder Junkies, Gigi's brother, check it out right here. But if you did like this video, cool, maybe you can give it a thumbs up. Or if you just like hearing somebody bullshit about heavy metal, then heavy metal your ass right into that subscribe button. And we'll see you next time on Concrete Spew, but until then, stay crazy, my friends. I fucking love ya.